And last but definitely not least is Sharisa Jackson, Chief Medical Executive with AMVETS.
Good morning. I'm so happy to be here today and be a part of this panel. How many of you have ever spoken to someone who wanted to take their life or attempted to do so? How many of you have spoken to a person within the last 3 to 5 minutes before they completed the act of suicide? Did you ask them if they had a firearm? Was it locked up? Had prescription drugs available? Pictures of their families and loved ones? We're losing the fight of reducing suicide because within that 3 to 5 minutes before suicide, that sweet spot, what are we doing? What are we saying to these veterans? Are we available? I ask this question: are we our brothers and sisters' keeper? We should all say, yes, I am. We must breathe life back into them and help them see that it's okay to not be okay, and that they are strong and worth it. I'm reminded of my first encounter with suicide. It happened after my first deployment to Iraq, and a fellow nurse was having some difficulties coping when she got back. I witnessed the struggle and demise of this nurse. Her character had changed, her zest for life, her sassy demeanor had all withered away. She was expected to continue the duties of a highly functioning ICU nurse, though she was suffering inside. I recall the whispers of the other nurses on the unit, but to my surprise, no one approached her and asked her if she needed help. I encountered her in our locker room at the end of the shift and noticed she was hunched over, hands resting on her knees and crying. At that moment, I thought, like many others, it's not my business. And I just wanted to leave because it was a long 3-day stretch of 12-hour shifts. But instead, I sat next to her, held her trembling hands and said, "You're going to be okay." I will never forget how hard this nurse cried on my shoulder, and I stayed there until she was ready to talk. I asked her how she was doing and how I could help. She said she had been trying to deal with the thoughts from her deployment, but hadn't been able to cope well. She stated she wanted her life to end because then she didn't have to see the faces of the soldiers that didn't make it. She stated she had heard the whispers on the unit, but she wasn't comfortable talking to anyone about her issues. She didn't believe anyone cared and that she wouldn't be missed and replaced after she was gone. She later disclosed that she was going to end her life that night when she got home. She had a plan, and her last cry out to God was that if one person cared, it would give her hope that her life was worth living. I gave her that hope that day, and she didn't take her life that night. But that was one veteran, when we all know there are many others like her. The reality is this: suicide doesn't have a name, a face, gender, or ethnicity. There's no set time or place for someone to take their life. So we must arm ourselves with tools to be that one shot to give hope to those in need. September is deemed Suicide Prevention Month, but in retrospect, every day should be Suicide Prevention Day. My dreams for veterans is that they have hope and that they believe that their life is worth living. We've all heard the stats about how many veterans have died to suicide in the latest VA report that just came out on last Friday. We aren't winning this war. One specific statistic shows women veterans rates increasing from 1.8 times more likely to take their lives to their civilian counterparts to 2.2 more times more likely. Now this pisses me off. So here's the formula I suggest to you all. Veterans plus resources minus risk factors equals lives saved. Suicide training helps, and push-ups and walks to create awareness helps, and I have stronger pecs and quads for doing it. But what are we missing? Early detection and immediate action is what we're missing when these veterans are giving us warning signs. Research like genomics that studies your DNA to depict exposure to trauma will foster early conversations with doctors about their treatment and offer them help. immediate action like our AMVETS HEAL program that answers veterans' calls when they're desperate, and we advocate for them to get the resources they need. Lastly, just being there for each other like battle buddies, or using apps like Not Okay to alert contacts in your phone when you're depressed and want to talk. I was blessed to hear Kevin Hines' story of his suicide attempt when he jumped the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco in 2000. He was 34 years old and he suffered from bipolar disorder. Of the 1,700 folks who have jumped from that bridge, about 25 have survived. One of the moments he made was that day he was making his way to the bridge, he was asking God if suicide was his fate, that someone would see his agony and stop him. Even when he got to the bridge and a lady approached him, he thought, yes, she will talk to me and convince me not to do it. But instead, she asked him to take a picture of her on the bridge. Everyone he encountered that day ignored the tears in his eyes, the hopelessness in his face, and the depressed state he was in. He said after he jumped, he remembers saying to God, I don't want to die today. He said the moment he hit free fall, it was an instant regret. There wasn't a dry eye in the room because we all know that even when veterans feel at their lowest, they don't want to take their lives. They just want the pain to end, the nightmares to stop, the hopelessness to become joy, to be inspired and motivated, and to be encouraged to live their best lives. We care, and it's not okay to be okay are all the messages that veterans need to hear and see. We must make a change today and remember that veterans don't want to die, they just want the pain to go away. So now I ask you, will you be your brothers and sisters' keeper? Thank you.